Okay, this is Orlando Wilson. What I want to talk about in this video is something to do with kidnap and ransom. Somebody sent me a question about whether it's legal to pay ransoms. The general rule is, of course not, because you're facilitating terrorism, you're funding terrorism. But people do get around it. If you pay a ransom to a terrorist organization or even a criminal organization, you can be charged yourself for financing terrorism. So again, it's something where you have to be extremely careful. If you're in that situation, you have to be extremely careful and get a lot of quality advice. Now, let me give you some examples. Now, after 9/11, the US put in stricter money laundering laws and laws governing, well, what's deemed as financing terrorism. One of the first big cases of a company being stung for financing terrorism was Chiquita Bananas, because in Colombia they've been paying the FARC, which is a recognized US terrorist organization, well, a terrorist organization recognized by the US. They've been paying them protection money to look after their banana plantations. So they had been funding the FARC. They got stung for $25 million, fined $25 to $30 million. Did they have any choice if they wanted to work those plantations? None at all. But they had broken the law by funding a terrorist organization. Within recent times, one of the areas where there's been a lot of ransoms paid has been for maritime vessels off Somalia. Have those ransoms gone to fund terrorism? 150% they have. They're funding, a lot of that money's gone to Al-Shabaab, etc. You're giving the money to pirates. Now, there was one insurance guy, I commented on a post on social media about this, and one insurance guy come up and said, oh, paying ransoms, we're not funding terrorists, etc. Okay, so where's the money going to? Salvation Army? You're giving the money to pirates, you're giving the money to terrorists. Where's that money going? And from a moral perspective, right, you might be saving a Westerner, you might be saving a ship, which is a valuable asset, you might be saving a crew. But how many other people are going to be killed by the money that you've sent to those terrorists? They're going to buy weapons, they'll buy ammunition, they'll fund other operations, they'll get stronger, and they'll spread more terror. So people that say paying for the ransoms for the ships off Somalia was not funding terrorism, to put it politely, they're in a complete state of denial. Now, one example of something that happened when they were when people were paying ransoms in Somalia. In 2011, I think 3 Brits, 1 American, and a couple of Kenyans were arrested in Mogadishu in Somalia. They arrived at the airport with $2 million. The Somalis threw them straight in jail. Why? The Somalis government didn't want money going to their opposition, Al-Shabaab. Those security contractors, if you want to call them that, I think they were charged, convicted, looking at 15 years in Somali jail, I think. Everything was commuted because government stepped in, etc., etc. And of course they lost the money. So there you have the Somali government not wanting people to give money to the terrorists, which is completely understandable if you have any common sense. So who was paying the ransoms for the ships in Somalia? Well, the insurance companies, which is, of course, everything leads back to Lloyd's of London. Was Lloyd's of London facilitating terrorism? Yeah, 100%, because they were paying ransoms for ships that had been kidnapped by pirates, and the money was going to terrorist organizations such as Al-Shabaab, etc. Has anybody at Lloyd's of London ever been convicted of funding terrorism? No, and they never will be. This is where everything gets murky and everything gets grey. It's about business. You go and pay the wrong person, you can end up in a lot of trouble. Lloyd's of London is a very well-connected company, virtually a front for the British government. I'm sure they were making a lot more money off their insurance policies by upping the insurance policies for all the ships going through the Red Sea, etc. So it was good business for them to say, okay, if your ship gets kidnapped, it gets hijacked, we'll pay the ransom and you'll get your ship back. It's business. Now, a recent example of a company that's just been stung was the French company, I think, Lafarge. They've just been charged by the US Justice Department because they were paying ISIS to operate a construction company in Syria. Their operations there, for them to operate in Syria, they had to pay everybody off. I think that they got hit for something like $700 million. I got zero sympathy for people that support terrorism, financially, etc. And I think they should have been charged a lot more. They should be out of business. They shouldn't be in business. As with Lloyd's of London, but they're an establishment company and they'll never go out of business. If an individual is kidnapped, generally people look the other way if a ransom's paid and the person is released. Generally. But again, this has a lot to do with government liaison, etc., etc., etc. And there can be a yes, there can be a no. But it's a very, very murky world. Officially, a lot of governments say they don't pay ransoms, but they'll turn a blind eye to private individuals paying ransoms. So again, it's a murky, grey world. A lot of it is how well connected you are, who you know, and if you're doing things for the right reasons. If you screw up, you can end up in a lot of trouble. One thing with people paying ransoms these days, you need to make sure the ransom's going to the right people, not the wrong people. And there's been cases managed by very large international risk management companies where apparently ransoms were paid to the wrong people. So it's a very murky world. Don't believe everything you see on the movies. The general rule is don't pay ransoms. I think the best thing that could happen in Somalia, when at the heyday of the piracy, was for one of the frigates, the naval frigates that was offshore, just to sail in and sink, use their naval gunnery to sink every one of the ships that had been hijacked. Because that would have made it clear to the pirates and the terrorists that, okay, we don't care. If you expect us to pay for these ships, we'll just blast you out the water. That way you've removed the value of the assets they're trying to extort money for. But the insurance companies were making big money on that, so it would never have happened. That way it helped to keep the piracy going for a lot longer than it should have been going on for. Because there's money involved for everybody, not just the bad guys. So business is business. And international business can be very murky. But the general rule is paying ransoms is funding terrorism. That's it. And if you think otherwise, you need to read up on international law and have some common sense, or just follow the money trail. Once the money's paid, where does it go, and what other damage does it do? So I have a book online referenced Kidnap and Ransom, and if you got any questions, feel free to drop me a line if you're connected with me in social media. But with all this stuff, especially the Kidnap and Ransom stuff, be extremely careful. And all I'm going to say is be extremely careful. I'll leave it there. So be good, stay out of trouble, and don't believe everything you're told. Question everything and use common sense, but question everything.